I'm Donny Lowery from Florence, Alabama. I call that home because I've lived here for 48 years. But originally I'm from Arkansas, South Arkansas. And grew up listening to my older brothers and sisters' music, which was record collections, 45 records. You probably don't remember the big hole, but the small records with a big hole. And the music of the day was mainly the pop music back in the late 50s and early 60s that I listened to that kind of got me interested in music. And that was Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and all that kind of stuff. A lot of it came out of Memphis for some reason or other. I was kind of drawn towards listening to the Sun Records music. And then I got older, and in 1964, the Beatles came on Ed Sullivan's show. And I saw them, and it turned my whole head around, and I went, whoa, that's what I want to do. I want to play music like that. So at the time, I was 14 years old, and I listened to that for about a year or so, and then I approached my mom and dad to see if I could trade my con trumpet in on a guitar. Reluctantly, they let me do it. So I started playing guitar about 15 years old and tried to copy all of the English Invasion stuff. Also liked the Beach Boys a lot, so I liked their harmonies and everything. And got into rock and roll and blues, and then progressed from there to a couple of little bands small town bands that we thought we were pretty good, but looking back, we were probably real terrible. But that's okay. It kept us going, and I followed it all the way into college at Louisiana Tech University, where I met some other musicians that were a little higher caliber talent level than my cronies, and that I was playing in. So I ended up joining those guys, and we ended up playing a lot of cover gigs and songs by Allman Brothers and Led Zeppelin and ZZ Top, that era, and played cover music till I got worn out on it. And then I decided that I wanted to try to maybe do a little songwriting myself, and got out of graduate school in Louisiana Tech and went to Atlanta, Georgia for my first real job as a fisheries scientist. And once I got over there, I thought I'd leave the music behind me and start my new career, my adult career, and decided I couldn't do that. So I sold some electric guitars and electric sound equipment and amplifiers and stuff, and bought an acoustic Ovation guitar. And then I started working on acoustic music, and I don't know, I was really into listening to James Taylor and that type of music, and country and a little bit of bluegrass, and it just morphed into me writing acoustic music, and that's when I ended up wanting to pursue my songwriting. So I decided that I needed to pursue that in another location rather than Atlanta, and I was going to either go to New York, LA, or Nashville, because those were the three music centers. But I was in a dentist office one day getting a checkup, and I picked up a Southern Living magazine, and there was an article about Rick Hall and Muscle Shoals music. And I went, wonder what that's about. And I read the article, and I was really super impressed by the artist that had recorded here and a lot of the songs that I knew. Brown Sugar, Wild Horses, Kodachrome, stuff like that. I went, wow, these are legitimate artists that I love their music. So I checked it out, and I found out that this was pre-Google days. You had to really research then, and I found out that TVA was considered by some, Muscle Shoals was considered to be the home of TVA. So being a fisheries biologist, I made that connection and thought this might be a good place for me to, on the side, pursue my songwriting. And that's how I ended up in the Shoals. One of the guys that worked for me in my fish lab his name is Larry Kay. He said, I heard you play guitar and sing. And I said, yeah, I'm trying to be a songwriter, whatever. And he said, well, my first cousin is a musician and a songwriter. And I think you two guys would hit it off. You have similar personalities and everything. And I said, well, great. I said, I'd like to meet him. And he said, okay, I'll get him to come by the Fish Lab one day. We'll go have lunch or something. I said, okay. And I said, what's his name? And he said, Mac McAnally. And that meant nothing to me at the time because nobody knew Mac McAnally at that time. He was 17 years old, but a genius songwriter back then. So we got together and we hit it off and started hanging out and playing guitar and singing together and ended up kind of with the same pursuit, trying to be a songwriter. We would like to sign with a publisher. And we migrated over to Wishbone Studio. I had met another guy in the music industry here a couple of weeks prior. His name is Larry Byram, great guitar player. Did a stint with Steppenwolf on the road and played all genres of music and was an exceptional player. I met him up at the Tennessee Line at a bar up there where he was playing in a club. And we got to talking and we hit it off. He was very nice and friendly. And I told him that I just moved here from Atlanta and I was trying to get into songwriting. And he said, well, you might ought to go by Wishbone Studio and meet Clayton Ivey. He's a good friend of mine and he'll give you a few minutes of his time, I think. And just mention my name and everything. So I did that, and I went after that. Clayton was real nice to me and everything. And back then, that was in the days of cassette tapes. And I said, well, here's a cassette of my songs. If you want to listen to them, I'd appreciate it and whatever. So we met and talked a while. Didn't listen to my songs while I was there, which didn't bother me at all because I'm always intimidated by that. So anyway, I gave him my phone number and didn't expect to ever hear from him, actually. It's the way the business is. But Clayton gave me a call the following week and said, my partner, Terry Woodford, wants to hear your songs, some more of your songs. Can you come over? And of course, went over there and I was telling Mac about this and he said, yeah, I know those guys. They're credible guys and everything. I had been like everybody else that came to town. I was trying to get in to see Rick Hall, but he was a hard one to get in to see because he was the godfather of Muscle Shoals music and always will be. But so I ended up going over to Wishbone and things worked out and Mac and I both signed at Wishbone the same within a week or two's time together. And we kind of grew up learning the music business together there at Wishbone. Like you say, Terry and Clayton were affiliated with Motown and they were doing production work for them and they had a publishing company with them also called Jobet. And but at that time, the country music genre was starting to gain a little speed too. And rather than being pop and R&B influenced, they were kind of branching out to tap the Nashville market a little more. And that's kind of where my music fit in, was a little more contemporary country. It wasn't pop, but it had a little country flair to it. So I think that's why they signed me and Mac also. And they were also branching out in their production efforts. And at the time, they were producing Hank Williams Jr. And so being his producer, they had an outlet for their songwriters and their songs to possibly make it to one of the Hank Williams Jr. records. So that was my very first recording, a song called Cherokee, that Terry and Clayton recorded on Hank Williams Jr. It was on the One Night Stands album on Warner Brothers. And like I say, my first cut, so that's very exciting. And on that same record, Mac had his first cut also. We both wrote the songs solo by ourselves with no co-writers. I think his song was called Daddy, and mine was called Cherokee. All the early stuff I wrote by myself pretty much, and the publishing companies down here, the competitive studios, didn't allow their writers to co-write with other publishing companies. So that meant that you either write with someone in your company or just write by yourself. So that's kind of where that idea started. But Mac and I started writing together, and then another guy joined us there. His name was Robert Byrne, and we started co-writing together. And I kind of like the aspect of co-writing, and you always learn something from the other co-writer, and no matter how much you contributed, whatever, it ended up being 50-50 most all the time, and I enjoyed that kind of aspect. So when after my 5-year period there with Wishbone, I started branching out more and going to Nashville, and up there it was more of a co-writing situation. So many publishers there on Music Row that they would intersperse, and their writers were actually, I guess, given free rein to write with whoever they wanted to. And that was kind of a neat experience, and I got to experience more co-writing opportunities there and kind of fell into that and like it. But I would also write by myself a lot of times, but I like both situations back and forth. Okay, Old Flame was a song that Mac brought to me that idea, and he said, I'm working on this song about old girlfriends, and I need to enlist you so I keep it country, keep it right. You know, Mac was, as you know, very musically complex, or can be, and he was using my influence to keep the song kind of in the country genre, which I appreciated it and understood that. And we got into it together, and I mean, it was pretty much a 50-50 collaboration, best I remember. I know Mac had all the ideas and the concept of the song and everything, and some of the musical things I transformed to simplify a little bit, to make it a little more commercial. And he would acknowledge that too. And that's, like I said, that's why I was in the room with him probably. But we hit it off well, and we collaborated well, and we ended up writing several songs together. Several of them were recorded. But that was our first big success, I guess, in the music business. And when it got recorded, we didn't really realize what we had done, but we had written a country standard, you know. You never know at the time what you're doing when you're doing it on songwriting, just following your creative lead. Turns out that song was recorded on their second album, Feel So Right, and it was the first single on the album, and it was #1 in 6 weeks after it was released. So it shot up the charts pretty quick, and we kind of realized, well, maybe we can write some country songs. So we started writing more songs. A little bit of a backstory there. One night I was sleeping over there in Florence, Alabama, and the phone rang at 10:30 at night, and it was Randy Owen, lead singer of Alabama. And he said, Donny, I hate to call you so late, but we just got through playing a show in Soldier Field in Chicago. And he said, we had to play Old Flame twice because people wouldn't sit down and turn their lighters out. And that gave me chill bumps. And I went, wow. He said, I just wanted you to know that. And that was pretty cool. And so anyway, fast forward about 25 years, Rascal Flatts wanted to record some Alabama songs. They did a tribute album to Alabama. And so they got Alabama to come sing on another version of Old Flame. And Mac McAnally called me while I was fly fishing in Arkansas and said, well, have you heard of the new Old Flame? Well, no, I've just heard about it. I said, I talked to John Paul White the other day, and he said they were about to finish it. And he said, what did John Paul White have to do with it? I said, well, he and Jason Isbell recorded it. And he said, oh, I'm talking about another version. Rascal Flatts and Alabama just recorded it, and Mark Wright produced it in Nashville. He said, that's the one I'm talking about. And I went, oh, okay. So we found out about 2 new versions, in a very short period of time there, which was neat. And there's been a lot of some other people cover it and everything, but those 3 are the prominent versions that people hear. And I personally love all 3 versions, but Jason Isbell and John Paul White are buddies of mine, and their version, they did it a little bit different in a minor key, which is, it gave it kind of a different angle and a little bittersweet, and I really like that version too, but it's a song that just kind of keeps on giving. I'm very proud of it, and very proud that Mac called me and said, let's write this song. I was standing in line at the grocery store at Kroger, and with 4 or 5 things getting ready to check out, this lady was in front of me, had her hair in curlers, and I think a house coat on, just pretty drab looking. And Old Flame came on the radio, and she was standing in front of me, singing every lyric, every word. And I felt compelled to say thank you, but I didn't. I'm too shy. And but she sang every word of that while I was standing in line with her of my song, and it was pretty cool. Awesome. But little things like that happen all the time, and you just go, oh yeah. And I'll hear it on the radio every now and then and say, best song Alabama ever recorded, or something like that. And a lot of people do believe that that was their big turning point. That was their big hit that put them over superstardom status. So, right, yeah, back in the late 80s that I co-wrote with Don Slitz. Started hanging out together and writing a whole lot. Actually, I've co-written more songs with Don Slitz than anybody else. And we were fortunate enough to have several of them recorded, and a couple of them were big hits, #1 records, one by the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band called Stand a Little Rain. They were looking for material. We never, or at least I never really wrote for a project. I just tried to write a good song, the best I could write. And I never did really have the knack or ability to write for artists that were going into the studio to record. I just didn't do that. And so I was going up to write with Don one day, and with Don, he's very fast, quick study, and you got to come in with something, bring some substance, or otherwise he'll go off and leave you writing, So, not literally, but just stay 2 steps ahead of you writing, So I got up there and I was so distraught because I did not have an idea. I did not have anything melodic or anything. So I meet him at 10 o'clock at MCA Studio, and he comes in a little bit late, which he was never late. But he said, man, I've got a hangover. I don't feel good. I stayed out till 4:30 last night. I hope you brought some ideas. And I went, man, I'm sorry, I'm just brain dead. And he said, well, what are the folks talking about in Muscle Shoals? And I said, well, all they're talking about is the drought, because we've been in an extended drought period. And all the farm crops were wilting and everything. And I said, all they're talking about is how we can stand a little rain. And he wrote that down on the top of a pad of a 8.5 by 11 yellow lined tablet and said, that's the song we're going to write. He said, he threw it down on the stool and said, I'm going to go take an aspirin and we're going to write this song when I get back. I said, okay. And he came back and he said, oh, I need you to come up with some music. My head hurts too much to play guitar. So I start working on a little riff and everything. And the next thing I know, I had a little melody that was kind of upbeat and feeling good to me and everything. So Don picks up the pad and starts writing some things out. And I say, oh yeah, that'll work. Let's add this line. And then he came up with a rainbow line, and I said, oh man, that's really cool. So we both got into it then and ended up writing that song. And that was one of those 20 or 30 minute songs. And he felt terrible, and I felt relieved. But anyway, we wrote this song, and the publisher, Don's publisher, came in and listened to it that day and said, man, this is cool. He said, can you guys put down a guitar vocal of this? And he said, I'll go play it for Jim Ed Norman, Paul Worley, who's producing the Dirt Band. He said they're looking for one more song on their album, this a greatest hits album called 20 Years of Dirt. So we said, okay, that'll be a long shot. But anyway, he went over there and played it. And man, they called back the next day and said, we want to put that song on hold. We're going to record it. And they did, and it was the only new song on the album, 20 Years of Dirt. So it was the next single, and went to #1, and we were excited. That's how things happen, very unpremeditated, but that's typical of the songwriting business. Yeah, when you try not, as a songwriter, in my opinion, you try not to do too much work for the producer, but you want to give them the direction of what the song should feel like and what groove, maybe the tempo or beats per minute or whatever that. But, a lot of them have great ideas on their own, and they've embellished a lot of my songs. And a lot of that goes back to the studio players. The session musicians have actually contributed more to my songs than producers have because of signature licks or chord patterns that they make that become signatures that weren't on my guitar vocal demo or whatever. So it goes both ways. They add to and embellish your song sometimes, and then other times they leave stuff out that you wish they would have put in, but that's just, being a songwriter, part of it.
How would you define or describe the Muscle Shoals sound?
I've kind of always thought it was that backbeat groove with the bass and drums being just kind of had an R&B aspect to it that you couldn't help but move your shoulders to, kind of like that. And so they were influenced in the early days by a lot of soul and R&B artists, a lot of black artists that I listened to at that time, but I didn't know it was Muscle Shoals music. Wilson Pickett, for instance, I had no idea that Mustang Sally was cut in Muscle Shoals or Land of a Thousand Dances and stuff like that. And I thought that was all Memphis black music, Stax and studios like that, but it turns out a lot of that was coming out of here. And then some of my early Stone songs that I loved, Brown Sugar and Wild Horses, recorded 8 blocks from here, and I went, my goodness, this place has a rich history of music. So that was another reason I wanted to move here, because I knew what was going on here, even though a lot of people that listen to these songs did not have a clue where they were recorded. And a lot of the artists that recorded here, that was one thing that they really liked about Muscle Shoals, because they could come here and not be harassed or annoyed by the public or anything like that. It's a small town. But they had the magic and the music, and these session players and producers down here knew what they wanted, and they knew how to get it on tape. And that's just kind of my version of what Muscle Shoals music is to me. It's a production, and then it did segue a little bit into the country realm where it fit my writing style more, and it gave my country songs a lot more feeling, and just the groove of Muscle Shoals is what I think about when I think about the Muscle Shoals music.
What advice would you give to young and aspiring songwriters?
Well, the world of songwriting is completely different now than when I started. I would say you need to go out and hang out with other songwriters as much as you can, and go to open mic nights, get up there and perform your songs, and and try to see the crowd response, the reaction. You can read body language a lot, and that means a lot when you're trying to be a songwriter. Don't just listen to your mom and dad and nieces and nephews and brother-in-laws. Listen to other people about what they actually objectively think about your songs. But you need to get out there, and I think you need to write whatever inspires you and not try to copy a style of any of the numerous great songwriters. Of course, we all steal a little bit from everybody. Everybody that I know probably has ripped off Bob Dylan or some of the great songwriters, but Jackson Brown, stuff. I hear tidbits of his songwriting in a lot of contemporary songs, and Mac McAnally, Jason Isbell, those caliber writers, they are just amazing and they're very inspiring. And I would listen to those kind of writers because they know what they're doing, and you don't have to literally lift anything plagiaristically, but you can get inspired by them by listening to them. And I would say do that.